Too soft. He's a low-energy menace. Too easy. Maybe he's a weak-minded. Oh!
Hey, Jonah, looking good. Very festive.
Menace! A feckless, treacherous, unhinged menace! Jared!
Spider-Man Miles Morales, in my honest opinion, is an immensely fun experience for superhero fans and gamers alike. It's a side story slash spin-off slash half sequel to 2018's Spider-Man on PS4, where we play as Spider Rookie Miles Morales. Bet you couldn't tell that from the title. The game is pretty upfront with the fact that it's a side story since it's $10 cheaper than a normal AAA title, and the story is much shorter. I've already beaten it twice and gotten all the trophies, so I've got plenty of shit to say in this video if you couldn't tell by the length already. Giving my thoughts on the first game briefly, I loved it. Story had a few slow bits but made up for it with an epic ass third act and the genuine effort to make this Spider-Man story its own by giving us a character focused story. We also got plenty of cool costumes and gameplay that aim to refine the Spider-Man game formula. This game took way more liberties with its title character than that other big superhero game that came out this year. I wonder how Avengers is doing now. Overall, the game was fun as hell and gave us another good superhero game that wasn't Batman for once. So why shouldn't we be hyped for this new installment to appease our taste before the true sequel? The game shoots for a smaller scale, focused story for Miles and a tighter gameplay package. It basically functions as the Batman Arkham Origins to Spider-Man's Batman Arkham Asylum. Only this time you're the sidekick left to watch over New York, while Peter goes on a parents' vacation to Europe with MJ on some journalist expo, not before making Miles promise with great power to hold the city down.
I promise to do everything in my power to protect this city. I promise.
We get the main villains in the form of two factions, one being the major tech corporation led by generic bad guy Simon Krieger, the shady hipster tech startup guy. The underground is a street gang that uses technology called programmable matter to 3D print their weapons and armor that enhances their physical abilities. Tech provided by their leader, the Tinker, who we get to know a lot more over the course of the game. Without spoiling anything, I think this game delivers for the most part. I can understand the criticism of it borrowing a little too much from Peter's story in regard to the villains, but I think it does enough to differentiate from the previous title for a fulfilling experience, while also expanding the lore of this game world with its characters. It's a nice smaller scale personal Spider-Man story, and for what I remember, those types of stories are why we love Spider-Man. But more importantly, this game offers a unique gameplay experience with Miles' character through the use of his extra spider powers. I'm gonna go in depth with the gameplay before talking about the characters in a super spoiler heavy section of the video. If you like the first game, get this one. Again, it's just $50. I think it's worth it. This game gives you enough bang for your buck in a nice gift wrapped Christmas package. Arkham Origins was set during Christmas too. Geez, I wonder why. Surprise, surprise, this game plays like the first one in most aspects. But if the game formula ain't broke, don't fix it, right? Apparently not their thought process with Peter's face. Both games are third-person superhero beat-em-ups in an open-world Manhattan that you traverse through all the wonderful web swinging. Similarly to Batman's combat, you play as Spider-Man as you go against groups of enemies in stealth and melee sections. You press one button to wail on people with melee, and one to dodge using the spider sense. Peter had 8 years of experience to back up his skills and gameplay. He was able to take down enemies as quickly as possible while using a wide array of gadgets. Miles has only been training for 1 year and only starts to hit superhero puberty in this game. He's a rookie Spider-Man and it shows. You can even fall flat on the ground if you mess up a swing. A really nice touch to emphasize how much of a noob our titled character is and how he'll be forced to break out of that in this game. Web swinging functions the same as last time and it flows just as smoothly here too. You get plenty of the same acrobatic flip kicking action with Spider-Man, only this time in the flavor of the exaggerated swagger of a black teen. Insomniac went through the extra effort of creating plenty of new animations for Miles across the board. He has different swing poses, air stunts, takedowns, and dodges. It all helps to show how the two Spider-Man move differently in fights while having some personality shown in the gameplay. This game changes things up with the addition of Miles' new electric venom powers and his camouflage ability, adding some layers to the gameplay and making counters really fun to mix up in. Venom powers are so damn cool. I don't care what anyone says. Using them in combat basically allows Miles to briefly enhance his melee attacks with electricity and deal out some devastating blows to enemies. Using one of these attacks takes up one of the power meters. That also works to heal you. Build this up through perfectly timed dodges and beating up your enemies. You acquire plenty more uses for Venom through building up the game's skill tree. One of those skills being the crowd controlling Venom Jump, which has you air launch multiple enemies at once to create an opening for air combos. Venom Dash works like an electricity enhanced web strike that lets you ragdoll your target into other enemies. It also helps to close the distance. Venom Slam has Miles jump in the air only to slam back down with electric shockwave to deal out some more damage. When fully upgraded, any use of these powers will stun numerous enemies with electricity. electricity. It can even be used to enhance leaps at the end of your swinging. Using all 3 meters allows Miles to unleash a large web-shaped explosion of electricity that can clear a room in a literal flash. This move even becomes an automatic activation when you lose all your health after upgrading all the way, though it can only be used once, and I honestly feel like a worse player whenever this does happen. This will happen more frequently on ultimate difficulty, so don't expect it to completely save you if you suck at the game. Camouflage allows you the chance to use stealth in ways Peter could only dream of. If an enemy is about to spot you or has spotted you, turning it on grants you an opening on them or the chance to retreat. You can use this to mess with enemies in normal melee sections as well, or just to fuck with normies on the street. I initially didn't use this much outside of stealth, but I learned to experiment with it way more as I progressed, especially when you're facing down some of the stronger enemies in the game. Camouflage gave me plenty of time to pull off stealth takedowns in quick succession. Fully upgrading it can even let you blind enemies in a quick flash. The gadgets Miles gets aren't as diverse as Peter's, but the obvious trade-off here is the super comic booky shit I spent like 4 paragraphs explaining to you. Holograms are good for dealing extra damage and crowd control. Gravity wells round all the enemies up for you in one spot. The remote mines can be used for stealth takedowns and electricity stuns outside of venom powers. And web shooters can be used to take enemies out fast by sticking them in place. Using these gadgets in tandem with Miles' powers only serve to make this game even more fun. Quick firing them is also good to get you out of a situation when you're overwhelmed. Insomniac went crazy with how they implemented his abilities in combat, and it honestly makes me wish the game was longer just so I could beat more people up. Puzzles in here also require a lot of venom powers being used. They're really simple, but they're more engaging than the puzzles last time, so that's a plus. We get 19 different suits to try on, and most of them are pretty cool. I really like the homemade suit just for the fact that it has Tims. We also get an animated look, classic look, a Spider-Verse look, and plenty of other cool looking suits, or some with a unique story significance. Completing all the side activities lets you acquire these suits with the different tokens you earn that can also be used to upgrade your gadgets. So there is at least some incentive to play through the side missions even if you find them boring. Applying different suit and visor mods adds some perks to gameplay, like adding extra gadget ammo, using air tricks to earn bonus venom power, electrifying weapon throws, changing up the frame rate to match Miles in the Spider-Verse film, and my personal favorite, a mod that has comic book words pop up when you fight. It's purely for the game's aesthetic, but it's a cool ass aesthetic, so why the fuck not? Seriously, how could I not love this as a comic book nerd? This is a feature I honestly would have loved to see in the Batman Arkham games. As a matter of fact, I think every superhero game should have a mode where comic words pop up when you fight. Side missions and collectibles function similar to how they did in the last game, so you can track your progress in each section of the city by looking at the map. You get a lot of side activities given to you from someone in Miles' personal life, and gives some kind of insight into their past or Miles' past in some capacity. Kind of like the backpack Spidey collects in the last one, only here they're catered more towards Miles. Like the birthday side quest at the end where you collect different postcards, and the Prowler audio collectibles followed by stories of his past. Speaking of Prowler, the Prowler suit here is cool as fuck. And this cool moment where you get to hear all the recorded audio in a beat mix. Active crimes and side missions are now curated by the Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man app, created by Miles' friend Genki, an app where people can request for Spider-Man's help directly. You can access it in-game and use it to generate crimes for you to complete on your own. So instead of waiting on the next crime to happen, you can just make it happen if you're in the mood. Jeez, Miles, charge your phone, you're making me anxious here. This is definitely something I can see Insomniac expanding on in a future game, which they should bring back, because why not give yourself more people to beat up? The side missions of Peter using holograms to train Miles in his absence were some of my favorites, and Peter voicing all the holograms was pure gold.
You dastardly holograms aren't ready for Spider-Man! You'll never get away with this evil hologram! I'll bash you into bird seed, Spider-Man!
Though it makes you wonder how someone who couldn't even pay rent in the last game could afford to make and voice all these different holograms while placing them throughout the city. But I'm asking too many questions. We get a total of 6 enemy bases from Roxxon and the Underground, both of which offer unique challenges for Miles outside of normal criminals and big damage spongy guys. Roxxon has tech that can disable your venom attacks temporarily, and infrared goggles and stealth. The latter won't appear too often until later in the game or in a second playthrough. The Underground has the wild tech that gives them some really cool melee weapons and allows them to jump and climb all over the place. Roxxon doesn't have a big guy enemy type though. Can't say the same for the Underground, because holy shit, these hammer shield dudes were annoying as hell. The enemies here provide a decent enough challenge to Miles on all fronts. The Underground are the more fun encounters in my opinion though. I might just be biased because of the tech they use though. No joke, I found myself wanting to play as a Tinker with all the wild shit she could do in this game. It makes me wonder just how far they could take this combat here if this game was a little longer. You can replace story missions though, so that's a plus. The side missions overall are pretty basic, but give me an excuse to fight people here, and I could honestly honestly care less for what it's for. I do think they do a decent job of building up the relationship Miles has with the members of the Harlem community. They're not given much in-depth characterization, but admittedly I found myself getting at least somewhat attached to these characters, as they do have some nice moments in the story and how frequently I saw them. Like, hey, there's Tails Bodega, or hey, there's some of the Haley street art. You can even find a Stan Lee Memorial Easter egg in here that I found completely on accident. They even have one side character and Feast that returns from last game, so I think the writers are making a genuine effort to make this game world feel lived in. I will say though, this game most certainly could have used another side villain here, or better yet, a mission chain with another Marvel superhero. Something that would at least give us another boss fight or some more cool moments in the game, which makes me wonder if this game will have DLC in the future. I honestly hope we get something like that. I think this game nails its gameplay by offering a shorter experience catered to Miles' abilities. It honestly makes you wonder what they would do with a full-scale Miles game if they plan on making one in the future. However, there are some issues that I found with it in terms of design and some really annoying technical mishaps. Combat is fun as hell, but I feel that it limits itself a little too much by design. The game shoots for a more realistic take on Spider-Man in terms of combat, but does it at the cost of restricting your movements. Whenever you're mashing the square button to attack, Spidey gets locked into these animations where he'll be laying on whoever it is you're fighting. This isn't much of an issue on its own, and it helps to make sure the player lands their attacks, but this does become an issue when you look at how this type of design is implemented in other aspects. For example, right here, you see me trying to hit these dudes getting into the car to escape, right? The game's even registering Miles' hits on them while they're in the car, as you see from the comic pop-ups, but they do not react at all because they're locked in the animation of getting into the car to escape, forcing me to chase them down despite having the clear chance to stop them right in their tracks. This animation lock-on in combat makes it so that you're hitting one enemy at a time unless it's a venom attack or a gadget. Notice how I can be a certain distance away from them, but Miles will move assist over to them in this kicking animation. This design choice does bring up some other issues. Gaming Brit explains this pretty well in his review of the first game.
It's more a case of you press the attack button and then that will trigger a strict punching animation between Spider-Man and the enemy. But in Spider-Man, your launch is going to trigger a strict pre-made animation where Spider-Man launches that one, and only one, enemy. But you can't launch two blokes into the air at once for some juggling. You can't use basic attacks creatively to hook in more enemies while performing a basic move.
These animations I also feel contribute to making this game feel a little sluggish at times. I found myself getting a little too mixed up at times in combat and getting overwhelmed. I think if there's anything that this game shows, it's that Insomniac can go a little crazier with the next game and have Spidey go off just beating up everyone in a super quick flow. Like, have us do some shit like this Kingpin beat down here. I understand that they're shooting for realism and I'm not really asking them to make any drastic changes. However, I can't help but feel that these games would benefit a lot from going nuts with the combat like some of the other Spider-Man games. You know, cut loose a little bit more in the next installment. Find a nice balance between the craziness and the realism they're shooting for. If they did, then I think you'd get really close to matching, if not surpassing, Batman's free flow system. Quick time events also return here, but don't really add much to the game. Replaying missions where they appear, I tried to fail them on purpose to see what would happen, and the game would always have Peter or Miles do something to correct the mistake, or the game literally cannot progress if you don't do the QTE. On the bridge, I tried multiple times to fail here to see if we could get some cutscene or animation of these civilians falling to their deaths, or Miles getting injured or something. Nope, instead you just have me awkwardly swinging around on the collapsing bridge and Miles being suspended in the air for an uncomfortably long amount of time. Can't save civilians without skipping arm day. The game is forcing you to engage with this mechanic without even giving you the satisfaction of seeing the consequences of screwing it up, because there are none. I think Insomniac should really cut loose with these too if they're going to insist they remain in the games. Like, have some cutscenes where Spidey just epically fails to save himself or someone because he didn't hit the button fast enough or something. Spider-Man 3 at least gave us that.
Please! Someone! I'm going to die!
Boss fights in this game are decent for the few that we have. Rhino is vulnerable to venom attacks and we get 2 boss fights with him. However, the second one has Tinker fight alongside us while he's been upgraded with Roxxon tech, making him immune to Zappy Pops.
Immune to your little zappy pops.
Zappy Pops? Come on, man.
His boss fights are a little basic. Dodge and make him run into a wall like an idiot so you can wail on him. The second boss fight does make a decent effort to be different, but just not enough to make it that interesting, especially since they feel the need to throw other enemies at us in the fight. He does start the game tearing shit up as a fun chase sequence though. Prowler uses more stealth and trickery to fight, which makes sense considering he's certainly not as physically capable as his nephew, and doesn't have the wild futuristic tech of the Tinkerer. His fight functions in 3 phases where in each one you wear him down and he amps up his tactics for the next one. fun. Tactics that include using invisibility like Miles, his green energy ray for projectiles, and his own set of holograms to fight with. All the Tinker encounters are fun as hell, and the final boss is pretty epic. The game gives us a cool chase where she's blowing up cars left and right trying to get away from us with her stolen new form. Then in her final boss fight, she works in phases like Prowler, but she gets way crazier with her attacks, like sending out these large death wheels, creating stationary turrets that can be thrown at her. She's pretty much the ultimate combination of all the underground enemies you fight in this game, and it makes for an epic final boss fight for the game. I really wish there were more boss fights considering how different Miles plays from Peter. Imagine if this game was longer and they gave us the same number of bosses as the last game. In regard to technical issues, my game crashed at least 3 or 4 times while playing. There were a few times where I got stuck beneath a map or a building. Texture pop-ins when coming into a new area were common. A few times where audio cut out during a cutscene. One time where I tried to talk to a character only to get stuck in place while no one was saying anything, pretending Miles wasn't even there. A weird slow-mo glitch that slowed down the entire game, and some bad frame rate dips when there was a lot of shit going on at once. Some of these primarily happen when the game is loading or is being pushed to its limit. I played on a regular PS4, so my shit could also just be outdated. Still felt the need to bring these up though. I have faith that Insomniac will at least patch these problems for the future, unlike the other superhero game that came out this year. Spider-Man's greatest hater, J. Jonah Jameson, also returns here with his podcast in all its glory.
You all remember Wilson Fisk, don't you? I'm told he's getting 5-star treatment in his cell, which is nicer than Jared's apartment.
How does this game making someone always talking shit about you so funny? This time the game balances this out by adding a new character in podcast with Danicast, who actively supports Spider-Man and even helps him out with taking down the Underground. She's not as entertaining to listen to as Jonah, but she does have her moments. I also really like the in-game Twitter feed and thought it was fun to read. Hell, he even gives you a trophy for it. Overall, I think this game is great in terms of gameplay despite a few missed opportunities. Insomniac clearly made a conscious effort to make his character play differently from Peter while also making sure he was just as fun to play, if not more so. How about the story though? Well, as a personal standalone tale that builds up Miles' character from the last game, I still think this game delivers for the most part. It's not on the same scale, and that game had more villains to fight. However, I think this game makes up for it with the focus on Miles' character and his relationship with the Underground's leader, the Tinkerer. I'm about to go more in depth with the story and characters, so if you don't want spoilers right now, here's a timestamp for skipping purposes. Still here after that? You either already know what happens, or you just don't care about spoilers. Either way, I give you a thumbs up, sir, madam, whoever you are watching this video. With Peter out of New York for the time being, Miles is left to deal with a raging conflict between the Underground and Roxxon. We find out later that the Tinker is Miles' childhood friend Finn Mason. She makes all of the Underground's tech, and this game builds up on her relationship with Miles pretty well. Finn has it out for Roxxon since Simon Krieger killed her brother Rick, someone else Miles knew when he was younger. Rick was a scientist at Roxxon who developed their new form of energy, Nuform. Part of the cover-up is the fact that Nuform is chemically unstable and has led to Roxxon employees getting sick and even dying. Rick is also included amongst the workers who got sick from this. Finn wants to use Nuform to blow up Roxxon's main reactor, stationed at Roxxon Plaza in Harlem to get back at Krieger. Miles has no choice but to stop her, especially when it's revealed that destroying this reactor will result in the destruction of all of Harlem, something Finn is not aware of. In the game's final mission, Miles fights the Underground and Roxxon in Harlem before fighting Finn at the plaza. After the fight, Miles has to absorb all the energy from it in order to keep it from exploding. However, he has to release this energy in some form or it'll probably kill him because it sure looks painful, which leads to Finn's final act of redemption in which she sacrifices herself to save Miles and all of Harlem. Krieger gets sold out by Aaron Davis 4 weeks later, so her death wasn't for nothing. On the surface, it sounds a lot like Doc Ock's conflict with Norman Osborn and Peter in the last game, but I feel like there are enough nuances here to warrant acknowledgement of those differences, while also offering up a story catered to the Miles of this game's universe. Going more in depth with him, I like this character a lot here. Some of the criticisms I've seen against him have been his voice sounding a little too high for a 17-year-old, and him not being quite as charismatic as Peter, the latter stated by Cosmonaut Variety Hour in his Quickie vid. The voice complaint can probably be blamed on the directing and prior performances with the same character and actor, so I don't think I'll fault anyone who thinks he sounds too young. I will, however, directly challenge Cosmonaut's critique. I promise I'm not trying to sound like a fanboy here. I still like your videos, Cosmonaut. Keep in mind that Miles has been Spider-Man's apprentice for just a year. How can he be a super charismatic Spidey when he's just starting to get his flips right? Hell, do you really expect someone who started off the game by fucking up a prisoner transport and fucked up the Nuform on the bridge to be competent and charismatic like the Spidey with nearly a decade of experience on his superhero resume? This isn't to say that he's wrong for wanting this out of Miles' character. If you're not feeling the character, then you're not feeling them. But damn, I'm just a little worried that people are gonna undercut this Miles Morales without giving him the proper chance to warm up to his role as a hero, just because he's not quite as likable as Peter, or whatever the reason is. Again, this isn't saying that you have to like Miles' character, but I think there's a good effort to make his character another part of this world Insomniac has created. In the same way Peter had a lot of collectibles and side activities that revealed things about his character in the past game, this game does that with Miles. You collect time capsules left behind by him and Finn that expands on their relationship and just how far back the two of them go. You get the Prowler side activity I mentioned earlier and a few others. I felt they did a good job of giving enough history to all the characters we see. Don't tell me you didn't at least feel some of the emotion of the basketball scene for the birthday side quest.
Man, I was not ready for that.
For me, this game was just another example of Miles earning his place as Spider-Man, only we get to play a role in that development. I'll be damned if Miles didn't earn his place as a hero, especially with all the supporting characters we get familiar with over time, some of which show up at the end for Finn's sacrifice and find out that Miles is Spider-Man. Sure, this might be a little bit cheesy in some aspects, but it felt earned. I got a little Spider-Man 2 train scene vibes from this. Not saying it's on the same level, but it reminded me of that scene. Just imagine how much more this moment would hit if this game was longer, and we had to spend more time with these characters. I don't know how else to put it other than saying that I really fuck with this version of Miles. He never stopped being a likable character for me, and it's great seeing him come into his own as Spider-Man here. Finn, aka the Tinker, is a little bit more questionable, but I honestly dug her character too. The game does a great job of building her relationship with Miles. It becomes pretty apparent how tight they were at one point, and how it's hella complicated for them to be enemies now. Finn's motivation to destroy Roxxon works to motivate her and Miles, since the game shows us that he was close with her brother too. We actually get plenty of flashbacks with the two of them. Miles' mom, Rio, even invites her over for dinner at the beginning of the story. You realize how tight you have to be with someone if your mom is totally fine with inviting them over for dinner? I'm emphasizing the personal relationship between these two because I genuinely found it to be the highlight of the story. I can see people being at odds with Finn after she gets completely blinded by a desire for revenge. Doesn't that sound familiar? But there are some things that you have to keep in mind when looking at this side of her character and why she's so mad at Miles. He's lied to her about being Spider-Man and wanting to join the Underground, has actively thwarted her plans by fighting her crew and stealing her tech, indirectly got her kidnapped by Rhino. Yes, these aren't good enough reasons for her to completely hate Miles and want to kill him, but she does have legitimate reasons to be mad at Miles and question what he says. Plus, she's obviously still distraught over what happened to her brother. You can also make the argument of her fueling a violent gang war and her causing a shit ton of damage in her chase scene, and I won't fault anyone for those either. I bring all this up to say that I think Finn's arc in this game works. When you look at it, the game spent a lot of time building this relationship. Finn's not just some generic love interest for Miles. No, these two go way back. It makes sense for her to recognize that Miles was trying to help her in the end, and why she'd be willing to sacrifice herself to save all of Harlem. She didn't want Miles or anyone else to die because of her, especially when she couldn't save her brother from Krieger. Part of me wishes she would have lived for a potential sequel and served as the Black Cat to Miles' Spidey, but for what it's worth, I think Finn's character works, and she's the best antagonist in the story in my opinion. Though there's not that much competition, so that might not be saying much. As for the other characters, Rio is cool despite not being in the story too much. She has enough heartwarming moments and some fun conversation with Miles in the game. I would have liked to see more of her though, but again, that's probably asking for a longer game. Genki is another likable character serving as Miles' best friend and tech guy. He never overstays his welcome, and he ended up growing on me too. Aaron Davis, aka the Prowler, is here as a shady mentor for Miles, and tries to keep Miles from interfering with Finn's final plan leading to his boss fight. Yeah, it's a little weird for him to try and keep Miles safe by kidnapping and trapping him, but it makes sense that he does this to keep his nephew alive after his brother died. He ends up redeeming himself in the end through turning himself and Krieger in. I hope to see him come back. The other minor side characters are decent and offer up some nice moments here and there, though there is another missed opportunity with them. Seeing how some of them will have seen Miles without a mask in the end, I saved all the side missions for my New Game Plus run till after I beat the main story to see if I would get any unique dialogue options from these characters where they acknowledge that Miles is Spider-Man in some capacity. Sadly, I found no such thing, and the missions play out as if they still happened before the game's climax. Really missed opportunity for some cool dialogue bits. I just would have liked to see them be a little bit more experimental with everything here. If Gloria knows Miles is the new Spider-Man, then does she know Peter is the original Spider-Man? A final thing I'll say is that I love the music here. There are a lot of hip-hop beats mixed in with heroic orchestras to match the vibe of Miles' character, and I think it works really well. I feel like this is another place where the Spider-Verse influence shows up, but I'm definitely not complaining because I also love that movie. Overall, Spider-Man Miles Morales was honestly really good. I had a lot of fun with the game and definitely think it's worth playing. What I hope to see out of the next game is a little less restriction in combat. I'm so damn serious about just wanting to cut loose with this combat, and I think Insomniac's on the right path with the differences in Miles and Peter's gameplay. There was a lot of genuine effort to make this game great on all fronts, and I think it deserves the praise for that. Please keep doing your thing, Insomniac. You got some good shit on your hands here. Now to wait for Venom. Oh god, not that one. That's all I have to say about Spider-Man Miles Morales. Did you agree with me? Think I was wrong that this game was way worse than what I've stated here? Did I fail to bring up anything you may have wanted to hear? Tell me how you really feel in the comment section below. My name is Tassan Young and I'm out. Be greater out there.